We'll wait till then. Okay. So I'd like to begin by wishing everyone good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, whatever time of day it is for you when you listen to it, whether it is the same day that we're broadcasting it live or later. So my greetings to all of you. And we will begin, as usual, by reciting the prayers of going for refuge and rousing bodhicitta. So these are important. It's important to have a good motivation. So please try to make sure that your heart and your mind and your words are all working together as you recite these prayers, and think of the meaning as you recite. O sangye chedan tsoge chonam la chancho bardo dane chapsum che dage chenyen gibe sunam girola penjir sanje robar sho sangye chedan tsoge chonam la Chancho bardo dane chapsum je dagi chenyen gibe sunam girola penjir sanje robar sho sanje chedan tsogi chonam la chancho bardo dane chapsum je Dagi chenyen gibe sanam girola penjir sanje robar sho. Until enlightenment I go for refuge to the Buddha, Dharma, and the sublime Sangha. By the merit of my listening to the Dharma, may I reach Buddhahood to benefit beings. Until enlightenment I go for refuge to the Buddha, Dharma, and the sublime Sangha. By the merit of my listening to the Dharma, may I reach Buddhahood to benefit beings. Until enlightenment I go for refuge to the Buddha, Dharma, and the sublime Sangha. By the merit of my listening to the Dharma, may I reach Buddhahood to benefit beings. Semchen tamje dewa dan dewe judan dembra juji donga dan donga ji judan rawar juji donga mebe dewa tamba tam min rawar juji nyerin chadan nitan rawar Danyon Shambola Nebra Juji. May all sentient beings be happy and have the causes of happiness. May they be free of suffering and the causes of suffering. May they never be parted from the highest joy, which is free of suffering. May they dwell in the great equanimity, free of attachment or hatred for those near or far. In the Dharma Expanse Palace of Akanishta is the essence of all Buddhas of the three times, who shows me directly my mind is Dharmakaya. I prostrate to the glorious exalted Guru. Please bless me and all sentient beings, so that our minds may become the Dharma. Please bless us so that the Dharma may become the path. Please bless us so that the path may dispel confusion. Please bless us so that confusion may arise as wisdom. And now please think to yourselves that we must bring all of our mothers, that is, all sentient beings who have been our mothers or who have been intimately connected to us in many lifetimes, and upon whom we are actually still dependent right now, because we're all sentient beings are kind of in this together. Even on this one earth, our own lives as humans also depends upon the lives of all the other living creatures on this earth. And so we're all dependent upon each other. And if we realize that, we recognize the kindness of all the other sentient beings, then we should remember that if we're grateful for that, if we're grateful for the other sentient beings, then we can remember that they also want to be happy, just as we want to be happy, so do they. And so recognizing that all of us are the same and wanting to be happy, we should wish to bring all of these beings to happiness. And in order to do so, we need to achieve a state where we can actually help them, which means achieving the state of Buddhahood. And so think to yourselves now that we are engaging in this process of listening, contemplating, and meditating upon the Dharma for this reason, and listen with the motivation of bodhicitta. The Dharma that we are listening to is the Dharma that we are listening to is the Treasury of Abhidharma by Vasubandhu, as explained by the ninth Karmapa Wangchuk Dorje in his commentary, Youthful Play. And of the 8 chapters of the commentary, or of the Treasury of Abhidharma, we are on the 6th, the teachings on the paths in individuals. So this teaching on the paths in individuals has 3 parts: the explanation of the paths, an explanation of individuals, and a specific explanation of the paths. So we completed the first. We're still speaking about the second, the explanation of individuals. We're coming close to the end of that one, actually. The explanation of the individuals has 3 topics, explaining the 4 pairs of individuals, the classifying them into 7 enumerations or 7 different categories, and then combining them into 6 substances. So these are the 3 parts, and we have actually completed the first and the second. We went through the second at the end of yesterday's talk, speaking about where did we get to? The 7 types of individuals. And so I just want to review with that, because actually that's connected to where we are now. So let's take a look. Let me get that up. Okay, so yesterday we were speaking about the 7 types of individuals, and actually we have talked about all of these individuals came up earlier in the discussion, except for the last 2. So the 7 types of individuals are followers of faith and followers of Dharma, right? So the followers of faith, who are they? Well, they are beings on the path of seeing, going through those 16 or the 15 moments of clear realization. They're ones who are following faith, the one who hear teachings, feel faith, practice the teachings, and then are able to go through the path of seeing because of their faith. And the followers of Dharma, those who have greater, higher faculties, sharper faculties, who are able to understand the meaning of the Dharma on their own, such as Buddhas or Prateka Buddhas. Then when you get to the next path, the path of meditation, then at that point, they become the followers of faith, are called by a different name. They're called convinced through faith, because they got to that point through faith, right? They've come to that point. We're on the path of meditation, and they're on that path because of their faith. And then the second one is the attained through seeing. So this is also the sharp faculties of followers of Dharma. When they achieve the end of the path of meditation, become the attained through seeing. So again, so the difference between these 2 is that one is following through faith, and the other is primarily seeing through prajna. Then the 5th type of category is made manifest by body, which is those non-returners who have achieved the absorption of cessation, right? So that's the 5th. And then the 6th are the 2 different types, or the 2 basic different types of non-learners. Of course, the arhats. Well, we talked about different types. We talked about six families and so forth. But if we look at the arhats in terms of how they achieve liberation, some are liberated by their prajna, by their quality of their intelligence. And so those are those who are freed through prajna. And then there are those who are liberated through both aspects, who in addition to having prajna have also achieved the absorption of cessation. Those are called liberated through both aspects. The two aspects being both prajna and that. So those are the 7. But sometimes it's also talked about this in terms of 6. So when we want to combine them into 6 substances, well, how does that happen? Maybe we should go and take a look at the root text first. So let me go over there. Oh, the wrong book, sorry. I want to give you this book. Not that one. You can't read the Tibetan. Not yet. Some of you can. Where are we? Okay. So combining them into 6 substances and combining those 7 into 6. This is 2 topics, the actual and the elaboration. There are 6. The 3 paths each have 2. In other words, there's 2 on the path of seeing, 2 on the path of meditation, and 2 on the path of no more learning when they're arhats. So in terms of their names, there are 7 individuals, but there are 6 in substance, because what this is saying is that the made manifest by body is not separate from either convinced through faith or and by seeing, the 2 classifications on the path of meditation. So it is like this: the 3 paths of seeing and so forth each have 2 substances or 2 different type of being. So on the path of seeing, there are followers of faith and followers of Dharma. That's the same, right? On the path of meditation, there are convinced through faith and attained through seeing. And on the path of learning, there are occasional and non-occasional liberation. So you take these 2. Hang on a second. I just realized I have to change something on my slide. Okay. So what do? We have these, oh, excuse me, technical things. I'm just not trying to do too many slides and such this morning. Okay. So we have these 7 types. We have the 7 types of individuals here, right? And it's here. So basically what we've got is there's this one category that's now red, made manifest by body. Well, they're actually on the path of seeing. So they're not any different than either convinced through faith or attained by seeing. So when we go to the 6 types of individuals, they're included in convinced through faith and attained by seeing. And then on the path of, when you have arhats, then we talk about them as either occasional liberation. Those are those who have the lower faculties, and non-occasional liberation, the unshakable arhats, who are never going to regress either in their qualities or so forth. So that's combining them into 6. And so to classify them extensively, the followers of faith alone can be classified in terms of faculty, path, detachment, and support for a total of 147,825 classifications. And the followers of Dhamma and so forth can also be calculated in the same way. We aren't going to go into detail on that. That's not so useful for us right now. If you want to study that, that is in Mikya Dorje's commentary, but they're working on translating that. The Marpa Translation Society is working on translating most of Mikya Dorje's great commentaries into English. And so when they are finished, it's a huge job because they're long commentaries, then hopefully we can take a look at them in English as well. So those are combining them into 6. So then we have a kind of an elaboration on these 2. We've talked about the arhats as either being liberated by prajna or by liberating by both. And so what do we mean by that? So that's the elaboration here. So to go to that topic. So identifying the 2 liberations, those who have gained cessation are liberated by both. The others by full knowing or prajna. So well then, What are liberation through both aspects and liberation by full knowing or prajna, you ask? So this is the question. We use these terms. They haven't yet been explained, so we have to explain them now. So those who have gained the absorption of cessation through the actual dhyana have been liberated by both, because they're liberated from afflictive obscurations by full knowing and from the obscurations of liberation by samadhi. So there are two different types of obscurations here. There are the afflictive obscurations. These are the 89 that we talked about. Basically, are different ways of classifying greed, hatred, delusion, pride, doubt, and the 5 different types of views, right? But there are also obscurations for liberation or for absorption, which are basically the things that prevent you from developing really deep samadhi. So when you have achieved the absorption of cessation, then you have absolutely no more obscurations of samadhi. So in other words, there's nothing that can prevent you. You are able to do any type of absorption you wish. So the obscurations of liberation are the 5 obscurations of forgetting the focus, torpor, agitation, effort, and lack of effort. So these are 5 things that are just basic meditation problems. So forgetting the focus is just like losing, if you're focusing on the breath or if you're focusing on one of the foundations of mindfulness, just forgetting that. Torpor is just dullness. And agitation, of course, it's excitement or regret. And effort is you're trying too hard. And lack of effort is you're not trying too hard enough. So you've got to be just the right balance. So the obscurations of absorption are the inability to produce the actual first dhyana, even when attached from the 3 realms, because the mind is not workable and so forth. So the obscurations of absorption prevent you from, like, here's the story. After the Buddha passed away, there was Ananda. He had been the Buddha's faithful attendant for years. He had a perfect memory. Everything the Buddha said, he could remember. He knew all the sutras. The Buddha had passed away, and under the guidance of Mahakashyapa, they decided that they wanted to compile all the sutras and all the Vinaya while they still could. So they were going to convene a council, the first council. And at that point, Mahakashyapa was really pretty intelligent. He realized, well, Ananda had spent all that time with the Buddha, but he actually hadn't done any meditation. He couldn't do the dhyanas, and he wasn't an arhat yet. So he thought to himself, okay. He made an announcement. Everyone had kind of been gathering around Rajgir to do this council, and then Kashyapa made an announcement. We're going to start in a week, but only arhats are able to attend. And everyone said, wait a minute. Ananda is the one who has memorized all the sutras. We can't have the council without him. And Kashyapa said, too bad. No arhat, no coming. And Ananda was really embarrassed. And then Kashyapa also criticized Ananda for other things he'd done, like in particular, when the Buddha was about to pass away, he dropped 3 really big hints. If you ask me to stay, I will. But Ananda just didn't take them and didn't make the request. And so Kashyapa really criticized Ananda and said, and you aren't even an arhat yet. So he then went off and went to a hut. And see, at that point, he had oh, of course, actually, I'm getting the story wrong. This is not a good example of what's going on here, because actually he was not even an arhat yet. He was not detached from the 3 realms. Well, he spent a week meditating and achieved the level of arhatship. I picked the wrong example. He was not someone who was detached from the 3 realms and not able to meditate yet. But there were such meditators or such practitioners who achieved the state of arhat on the level of not unable. So it's not clear in the sutras, but yesterday we spoke about Chotapandaka. Chotapandaka achieved an arhatship just sweeping a courtyard. So at that point, had he developed the samadhis, the form and formless meditation, it's unlikely. So he would have been one of the ones in this commentary. And this is reminding me that actually there was a question about this that came in. Yes, the question is it possible to go through the path of seeing and the path of meditation that quickly? And the answer is yes. Look at Chotapandaka. But he was someone who had extraordinary capabilities and who was at the time of the Buddha and blessed by the Buddha and given the instructions specifically by the Buddha. We can also look at the example of the Buddha himself, who passed through the paths of not just the path of seeing, but the path of joining, the path of seeing, and the path of meditation, all in the course of one night. So in the Great Exposition system, or in the foundation vehicle, it's possible to go from being on the path of accumulation to becoming an arhat in a very short period of time. Okay, so the others, those other than those who are liberated through both aspects, are liberated by full knowing from the afflictive obscurations on the basis of the preparation of the first dhyana not enable. This is liberation through the aspect of prajna. So these are known as the ornamented and the unornamented arhat. So basically, the ornamented arhat is one who has the absorption. They're decorated or ornamented, adorned with the absorption. And the one who is just liberated by prajna is not. So then there's the question. There's the distinction in the perfection of qualities. So here the root text reads, from their absorptions, faculties, and results, learners are called perfect. Non-learners are perfect through two. So sometimes we call beings perfect. And you can either be learners, which means people who are on the paths of seeing and meditation, or they can be non-learners, which means any of the various types of arhats, pratyeka Buddhas, and Buddhas. So what makes someone perfect? Well, it's the absorption. If you have that level of really strong meditation. Their faculties, are your faculties sharp or dull? And the results, are you freed from the desire realm or not? So those are the three things that determine whether a learner is called perfect. And non-learners are perfect through two, which would be from their absorptions and their faculties. All non-learners are perfect in their results because they're all arhats. So it says in a sutra, all those who have discarded 5 afflictions and have the unlosable dharmas are perfect. When they have discarded the 5 afflictions and they have the dharmas that cannot be lost, the qualities they cannot lose, then they're perfect. So what is it that makes learners and non-learners perfect? So first, to speak about learners. The first is from their perfection of absorption, the attainment of cessation, the dharma which is similar to liberation. When you have the absorption, as we talked about the other day, the absorption of cessation is a stage, a deep absorption that you enter, and in it, the mind and the mental factors cease. So it is similar to the final nirvana. So that is called perfection. The perfection of faculties, sharp faculties which cannot be lost through conditions. If you have dull faculties and you lose your mindfulness and there's something attractive or unattractive, then you might feel afflictions, right? And the perfection of results. The non-returner who has abandoned the 5 afflictions that lead to lowest. So that would be the perfection of results. So learners are called perfect. Now, this doesn't mean that you have to have all 3. They're not. If you can be perfect because of the absorption. So maybe you're someone of lower faculties, but you manage to achieve cessation. Well, then you're going to be perfect through absorption. Or you might be perfect in faculties, but not perfect in absorption. Or you can be perfect in result. You can be a non-returner, but not necessarily, but not have perfected either absorption of their faculties. So they're kind of like different permutations of them. Now the learners, so those are the learners, and then the non-learners are different. As Wangzhut Dorje says, there are 4 alternatives of learners who are perfect and those who are not, through the 2 aspects of faculty and absorption. That means that if you, with faculties, we talk about sharp and dull faculties, right? So if you are an arhat and you have sharp faculties, then you're called perfect. If you are an arhat and you have achieved the absorption of cessation, then you're called perfect, even if you're dull faculty. So there are 4 alternatives. Well, there's sharp faculties, people who haven't developed liberation, so they're 1. They just have the 1. There are dull faculty people, arhats, who have achieved the absorption of cessation. They're perfect through that. Then there are dull faculties who are perfect through, who are perfect through both. So they're sharp faculties and they have some cessation, so they're perfect through both. And there are those who are not perfect through either. There are arhats, so they're perfect in terms of the result, but they aren't sharp faculties and they don't have the absorption of cessation. So that's the discussion of the, that completes the discussion of the second main part of the chapter, the explanation of the different types of individuals, the stream enters, once returners, non-returners, and arhats. So now we've come to the third main topic of the chapter today. And there were some other questions that came in by email this morning, which I didn't remember as I started the text, but if I address them now, then we will get sidetracked. So we'll talk about them at the end of the class, and you could send me a chat just to remind me of them at that time. So we'll now talk about the third main section of the chapter, the explanation of the path, a specific explanation of paths. And this has three topics: the qualities of the different paths, the presentation of the factors of enlightenment, and liberation through the path. And so here, actually, this is an important topic. The first is the paths are, well, what do we actually do? The paths refer to the types of meditation that we do to actually eliminate the obscurations or the afflictions. So that's one important thing. The second is the presentation of the factors of enlightenment, which are really important for us to understand. And so we'll go into those in a bit of depth this morning. And then the liberation attained through the path. And so that we'll cover tomorrow. So the qualities of the different paths. This has 2 points. There are the distinctions of the 4 paths of joining and so forth. So remember, we have the word path is used with two kind of different meanings, and there are some different terms that go over it. So let's just review that. There's the way that we usually learn it when you're first, you talk about there's the path of accumulation, path of joining, path of seeing, path of meditation, and path of no more learning. So those 5 paths. So those are the 5 paths, and they're thinking about paths in terms of the long scale, right? And then you've got the 4 paths of joining, no more obstacles, liberation, and the distinctive path, which we've mentioned also. Now, these are talking about it in the small scale. So, for example, the only example I can think of is probably one that's really only going to make total sense to people in the eastern United States. There's the Appalachian Trail that runs from Georgia to Maine. And it's one big long trail that goes over many different mountains and then ends up in Maine, right? So there's the whole trail. That's like a big path, but within each trail, within each part of the trail, within each section of the trail, there are parts where first it goes over one mountain and down. So that's like a shorter path, right? So it's that long path. The Appalachian Trail is made up of many shorter paths. If you want to take the entire Appalachian Trail and walk the entire Appalachian Trail, you start in March and you end in October or something like that. Some people do it in 5 months. Some people take 6 or 7. If you want to just do a part, you can go over one mountain and down in a day or 2, depending on the mountain. They're not as big mountains in the eastern United States as in other parts of the world. So similarly, we've got the 5 paths. That's kind of like the whole Appalachian Trail. And then you've got these 4 specific paths. They're like the specific paths that go over specific humps along the path that get you over a specific point. Right? So you've got 5 big paths and the 4 small paths. So the qualities of the different paths has 2 points: the distinctive 4 paths of joining, etc. So here it says in the text, in brief, there are 4 types of path. They're called distinctive, liberation, no obstacles, and the path of joining. So we have spoken about these quite a bit, in particular the paths of liberation and the path of no obstacles already quite a bit. So we've been talking about paths, and the question is, so There are so many types of paths. Many paths have been explained. But to put it concisely, how many paths are there, you ask? In brief, there are 4 types of all the paths. They're called the distinctive path. The distinctive path is what? It's the time after you've been liberated and everything onward. It's like after you get over Springer Mountain in Georgia, then everything after that is like distinctive path. It's taking you further and further away from Springer Mountain in Georgia, the start of the Appalachian Trail. There's the path of liberation, which is when you've got over the summit of Springer Mountain and you're heading downhill. There is the path of no obstacles. Nothing is stopping you. You're getting to the, you've got to the top. And then the path of joining is first climbing up Springer Mountain. So these are like the 4 different stages. I don't know if I mean, how many of you are on the East Coast of the United States even know what I'm talking about when I use the example of this trail? You can, I suppose there is in the Western United States, there's a Pacific Coast Crest Trail, but I don't know the names of the mountains on that because I don't originally come from that area. Anyways, those are like the 4 paths. It's like you go up the different paths. So in the text, they're presented from the top down or from the last to the first, but to explain them in the accord of the way they arise. In the order in which they arise, first, there's the path of joining, which is the cause of the path of no obstacles. So this means that everything, what you were doing in order to reach the point where you can actually abandon the antidote. So the analogy is you've got the first mountain on the trail. This is climbing the first mountain. Okay, climbing, but not yet getting to the summit. In terms of the meaning, or to give an example of it rather than an analogy, an example of it is when you are on the path, the larger path of joining, and you're in the stages of greater forbearance and supreme worldly dharmas. These prepare you. They're the training that prepare you for the first moment of the path of seeing, right? They're the last 2 moments of the path of the big path of joining. So these are the path of joining for the first moment of the path of seeing. And then the next one is the path of no obstacles, which for the most part is what actually discards obscuration. So what it means is that's that moment when the wisdom that sees the nature a little bit better arises, and that actually eliminates the afflictions that are based upon that misconception of the nature. So this is, in the analogy, it's kind of like getting to the top of that first mountain, standing on the summit for just a second, but it's cold, so you have to hurry down. And in terms of the example or the meaning, we would say it would be like reaching the first moment of path of seeing, the Dharma forbearance of suffering, where you're actually seeing the suffering of the desire realm, right? And then there's the path of liberation, which is the first arising of freedom from obscurations. You've reached the top of the mountain and now you're just walking downhill. It's like that beginning of going downhill, that very first moment. I'm free of everything that kept me from getting to the top. Now I can go down. And so it's like that. This is the second moment of the path of seeing, the Dharma knowing of suffering. You've seen suffering, the afflictions are gone, and you know that you're free. You recognize that you're free. That's that moment. And then, so it's that first arising of freedom. And then there is the distinctive path, which is the continuation of the liberation following that. So this is something you've got a little bit ways down from the summit of the first mountain. And so it's like everything on from there is just taking you further and further away from the obscurations of that. So this is like the 16th moment of clear liberation onward is taking you further and further away from the discards of seeing and from being obscured by them. So you're free and you're getting further away from the state of bondage. So that's what it's like. So to illustrate with the path of seeing, for example, the precursors to realization, that mean the path of, are what? Those are the 4 stages of the path of joining. The 8 forbearances, those are the path of no obstacles. The 8 knowings are paths of liberation. And then everything which follows subsequent knowing of the path are the distinctive path. So those are the four in terms of the path of seeing. But we also see this for each, when you eliminate each of the discards for the higher realms. There's a distinctive path, getting ready to there's the path of joining, which is getting ready to eliminate the discards of the form of the desire realm. The moment you eliminate the discards, when that wisdom arises, you see the nature better, you eliminate the discards, that's no obstacles, nothing can stop it. The next moment is liberation. And then after that, you have the path of distinctive. The distinctive path, which takes you further and further away from that. So why are these called paths? Because it's kind of like some of them are just a moment long. So why is it called a path? So the reason is, as one goes from there to nirvana or finds nirvana by these, or you could say, look, so you search for the way, you're on the way to nirvana. How do you get there? By doing this. So these are like the path that gets you to nirvana. Alternatively, another explanation, which is pretty similar, slightly different, a little slight difference in emphasis, is if you want to find nirvana, so you are looking, you're searching for nirvana. And how do you search? You search by going down the path. So that's why they are called paths. They're the way that get you there, the way by which you find nirvana. So that is why they are called the five paths. Now we can do these in different stages, but they're easier when you're doing certain types of meditation and harder when on others. So there are distinctions of difficult, easy, slow, or fast. So in other words, sometimes it's harder. There's some levels of meditation where it's hard to produce these four paths, and some where it's easier. And some people are slower about producing them, and some are quicker. So here's where it says, the jhana's paths are easy, those of other levels difficult. Dull minds are slow to clearly know, the other ones know clearly quickly. So the sutra says there are paths that are slow to know clearly and difficult. There are paths that are quick to know clearly and difficult. Likewise, there are also two that are easy. So there are kind of four permutations here. So what are these? Well, the four jhanas paths are easy. So if you remember, we can do these paths on any sort of different levels. There's the level of not enabled, the preparations for the first jhana in the desire realm. There's the four levels of dhyana. Then there's also the special dhyana, and then there are the levels of the formless. So which of these are the easiest type of meditation to use if we want to overcome the afflictions? Well, the easiest ones are the ones of the dhyanas. Now, why are they the easiest? Well, the reason given is because they're fully embraced by the branches of dhyana. This means that they have the qualities of joy and bliss and analysis, concentration, and so forth, and pliancy that will be described in the 8th chapter. So we don't need to go into them in detail now, but they have these different qualities that make them very, very comfortable and easy meditations to do. That's the first benefit. And the second part is that they arise naturally through equal parts of tranquility, that is shamatha meditation, and insight without the need for effort. In other words, when you're in the dhyana meditations, your mind is very stable, but it's also very easy to clearly see what's going on. So that means that it's easy. Those paths of the other levels, that means the level of not enable, which is a preparation for this first dhyana, special dhyana, and then all the levels of the formless are difficult because they are not embraced by the branches and must be produced by making efforts at the path, as shamatha and insight are not equally balanced. So what this means is that on the level of not enable, it's a preparation for achieving the first jhana. So you haven't got there yet. So you're still working at it. So you're working hard at your meditation. And because of that, you don't have shamatha. Similarly, on the level of special dhyana, which is kind of in between the first and second dhyana, and again, this is explained in the 8th chapter more, but that's also a level where you have to put a little bit of effort into your meditation. So you have the insight there, but you don't have the quality of shamatha that you do on the actual dhyana meditations. So they're not equally balanced. So here, as it says, on the first two, there is less tranquility, there is less shamatha, because you are working. That's why. You have to work to maintain those levels. And in the formless, it says, there is less insight. The formless realms are basically realms where you're just in a really, really deep state of tranquility meditation. So the insight is harder. It's just not there naturally. So that's the first thing. It's kind of which level. And so in terms of the levels where it's easiest to kind of meditate on the nature of things, the 4 dhyanas are presented in the sutras, in both the Great Exposition and in the Mahayana sutras. They're presented as like the easiest way to do the meditations and overcome the afflictions. That also depends upon your faculties, because we have dull and sharp faculties, right? So those minds with those with dull minds or dull prajna, full knowing, whether on an easy or difficult path, are slow to clearly know and realize. That means your dull faculties, then it's harder for you to develop the prajna of seeing things. Even if you're on the easy path, you may have achieved the dhyanas. You're sitting on the 4th dhyana, you're fine, but you're dull faculty, so you're not as quick. It's just not much to do about it. And the reason why is because you direct yourselves toward an object and then come to know it slowly. It takes you a while to see it because your faculties are dull. The other ones, which means those with sharp faculties, know clearly, quickly, whatever level they're on, because their minds are quick. So that no matter if you're sharp faculty, like the Buddha, he had sharp faculties, and he was actually able to know very quickly. If we think about our story of Chotapantaka yesterday, he may have been really stupid on one level, but he must have been really sharp faculties to go through the paths that quickly, right? If you're not sharp faculty, you aren't going to go through them that quickly. If we think about Chotapantaka, he probably had we'd probably just say these days that he was dyslexic or something, and he'd put him in a special ed. There are lots of people who just are unable to learn the alphabet, but are actually pretty intelligent in other levels. And knowing the alphabet does not make you intelligent. So that's the discussion of the first aspect, the 4 different paths. And the important point is to just kind of, if we take a look at this on the level of how do you overcome each individual obstacle? Well, you have to prepare to do it. That's the path of joy. Then there's the moment where you actually develop the insight. That's the path of no obstacles. Then there's the next moment you realize you're free. And then there's the moment where then there's the distinctive path, which is everything on from there, where you're just sort of freeing yourself from it. Okay. So that is that, and now we've come to the presentation of the factors of enlightenment. This has 5 topics: the classifications and groupings of the factors of enlightenment, during which periods one meditates on them, examining whether they're defiled or undefiled, and examining what levels they're on and when faith from knowing is attained. So we're going to speak about the first of these, the classifications and groupings of the factors of enlightenment. And this has 2 topics: the result, enlightenment, and the cause, the dharmas of the path. Because we talk about the factors of enlightenment. When you say the factors of enlightenment, there are 2 questions. What do we mean by enlightenment? And what do we mean by factors? So what do we mean by enlightenment? Well, enlightenment is the result of the factors of enlightenment. So what is it? The result of enlightenment, here it says, knowing extinction and non-arising is enlightenment. So we'll go through Wangchuk Dorje's commentary first. The path is given the name factors of enlightenment. So when we say 37 factors of enlightenment, that basically is another way of classifying the whole path from the beginning to the end, kind of like the entire Appalachian Trail. The whole thing is given the name the factors of enlightenment. The 37, and it says the 37 factors are the 4 foundations of mindfulness, 4 complete abandonments, 4 feet of miracles, 5 faculties, 5 powers, 7 branches of enlightenment, and the Noble Eightfold Path. And if you got that, we will go through it again in a moment. But first, we really need to talk about what does it mean to say enlightenment. I mean, when we're talking about enlightenment, what are we saying? Knowing extinction and non-arising. What is this? And this is not so clear either in the auto commentary or in Wangchuk Dorje. It doesn't say anything about it. So what do we mean by knowing extinction? What do we mean by non-arising? Extinction basically means, on one level, what we're talking about, extinction is saying everything that needs to be done is done. It's all gone. In particular, all of the afflictions have been abandoned. They've been extinguished. There's nothing more to do there. And then knowing non-arising means that there's nothing more that you need to develop. You've already developed all of the qualities. So that's the knowing, extinction, and non-arising. So what do we mean about this in particular? Well, when we're talking about it, it's what it says is in Yashomitara is that knowing extinction means that I've completely known suffering. And it's really absolutely, completely knowing it truly as it is, completely and knowing truly as it is that I have known suffering. And then it's knowing I have abandoned the origin. And it's knowing it completely, fully, and exactly as it is. You've completely abandoned the origin. So that's the second. And then it's knowing I have manifested cessation. And completely and fully and absolutely knowing it just exactly as it is. It's totally knowing it. It's like different than on the path of seeing. On the path of seeing, yes, you have manifested cessation, but it's not the complete one yet, right? This is like I've completely manifested and fully. And then I have meditated on the path and knowing that you have done it exactly as it is, fully knowing that you have done it. So that is the knowing extinction, knowing that you have known the suffering, abandoned the origin, knowing that you have manifested cessation, and knowing that you have meditated on the path, that it's all done. That's knowing that, knowing extinction. Then the knowing non-arising here means knowing I have fully known suffering, and there is nothing more for me to know. I have fully abandoned the origin, and there's nothing more for me to know. I've fully done it. There's nothing more. No, there's nothing more to arise. Nothing new to come. Everything's been extinguished. There's no more to arise. I have fully manifested cessation. And knowing that it's complete. And then I have meditated on the path, and there's no more path to meditate. So there is nothing more to know about suffering. There is no more origin to abandon. There is no more cessation to manifest, and there is no more path to meditate on. So that is the knowing non-arising. So there are two aspects. Knowing that you have fully done, we've got the 4 actions for each of the truths, right? And then knowing that there is no more to do them. So that is what we mean by knowing extinction and non-arising. So that is what we say is enlightenment. Basically, it's knowing like, I'm done. It's knowing I'm done. I've done the whole path. There's nothing more for me to do. Is what we would say as the knowing extinction. So that's the result. So what is the cause of this? Well, the cause of this is the 37 factors of enlightenment. So with the 37 factors of enlightenment, they're kind of grouped into groups. We've got the 4 foundations of mindfulness, which we've already spoken about. Mindfulness of body, mindfulness of feelings, mindfulness of mind, and mindfulness of dharmas. Then we've got the 4 complete abandonments, the 4 feet of miracles, the 5 faculties. Those of you who have studied the 2nd chapter should remember the 5 faculties of faith, mindfulness, diligence, prajna. Faith, diligence, mindfulness, prajna, and samadhi. That's the order. And then the 5 powers, which are essentially the same, just stronger. The 7 branches of enlightenment and the noble 8-fold path. So what are these? Well, the 4 foundations of mindfulness are what we just said: mindfulness of body, mindfulness of feelings, mindfulness of mind, and mindfulness of dharmas. We've already been through these a bit. Basically, it's knowing the body in the body, knowing the feelings, knowing mind, being aware of them, mindful of them, and then on that basis, it is having the prajna that knows their nature. So the actual nature of the four foundations of mindfulness is the prajna that knows their nature. That's what we're really talking about. Mindfulness, the four foundations of mindfulness, we say, mindfulness is the basis. When you have mindfulness, that means that the prajna can develop. So that's why it's called the foundation of mindfulness. The foundation is not exactly a literal translation of the term, but it's a common translation, so I'm going to use it, and it works, actually. You've got mindfulness, and on that basis, you can do it. Another way to translate it would be, nirosapa would be like close. Some people translate this as the close placement of mindfulness. Mindfulness is there, and because you have that mindfulness that's close by, then the prajna can develop. Of mindfulness of body, feelings, and mind. Then we've got this next one, which is it probably might well be a new one for you. The four complete abandonments. So these are when you have the wish and you make efforts and you are diligent to do four things. And so what are those four things? Abandoning non-virtuous dharmas that have already arisen. In other words, you recognize that you've got greed, hatred, desire, and delusion, and so forth, and you recognize that you don't want to do them, or you recognize that you have done bad things and you don't want to do them again. Making sure that they have happened, they've done, and you don't want to do it. It's kind of like if you are a smoker and you decide, I got to quit, I don't want to do it. Prevent those that have not arisen. So that would be prevent those non-virtuous dharmas that have not arisen from arising. So this would mean like, the analogy would be like, no, you don't smoke and you're going to do what you can to make sure that you don't start. Oh, am I sharing my whole screen instead of just the whole thing? One moment. There we go, that's better. I think I was sharing too much of my screen. So the four complete abandonments include these. The second is the preventing those that have not arisen from arising. So it's trying to prevent them from happening. And the third is producing virtuous dharmas that have not yet arisen. So you recognize that you don't really have discipline, or you don't have enough prajna, you don't have enough faith, you don't have the right view, or so forth. And so you make efforts to do that. And then developing virtuous dharmas that have arisen. You recognize that you have them, but they are just kind of not strong enough yet, so you need to develop them. So these are the four complete abandonments. Sometimes they're also called the four right endeavors. So they're given these two different names, but they're the same thing. So the four complete abandonments or the four right endeavors. So here there is a quotation from a sutra that is quoted in the Chim Abhidharma, the ornament of the Abhidharma. And so here, just to read this quotation, it says, generate aspiration, apply exertion, initiate effort, properly seize the mind, and correctly set the mind. And why do you do this? In order to abandon non-virtuous or moral states that have already arisen, so that those not yet arisen do not arise, and to generate virtuous dharmas not yet arisen, and to generate aspiration, apply exertion, initiate effort, properly seize the mind, and correctly set the mind in order to maintain virtue already arisen, to not forget it, to perfect meditation on it, to later cultivate it, enhance it, increase it, and manifest it with transcendent wisdom. So actually, we don't really talk about these in so much, but it strikes me that this is actually a really important thing for us to do as students of the Dharma. If you want to take the Abhidharma, is something that you are actually, it's not just an academic topic or just some knowledge that you file in the mind, but actually put it into practice. We have to go through these four complete abandonments. Even if you're not studying Abhidharma, no matter what Dharma practice we're doing, we have to recognize what our deficiencies are and try to fix them. And try to prevent making mistakes in the future. This is really important. If we don't actually, in our own practice, try to recognize our faults and eliminate them, that we're never going to get better. We also have to recognize what we're lacking and what we need to develop. Many of us are lacking in diligence. Maybe if we're lacking in some other quality, maybe we're lacking in samadhi. We haven't developed samadhi. Why haven't we developed samadhi? It's because we haven't put the effort into it. We haven't tried enough yet. Well, there might be other reasons, but it's trying to want you to do it. Now, this isn't saying that you're actually completely doing it yet. This is saying that you have the wish to do so. And then that you're going to make, once you have that wish, then you're going to make the efforts to do so. And then when you have those efforts, then you're being diligent about it. It's like you have that excitement about wanting to practice them. So you do what you can to develop it. So to give up the ones that you need to give up your faults and develop your qualities. This is something that we need to do, and we have to do it throughout the path. So this is actually a really important thing. These happen according to the, later we'll get to it, these come about on the path of accumulation. So in the sense, they're like a beginner dharma. But if we don't go through this beginner dharma, then how are we ever going to get any further? So it's important for us to go through these beginner dharmas, the 4 complete abandonments of trying to identify your faults, eliminate them, prevent new faults from happening. That's the first 2, abandoning non-virtuous dharmas that have arisen and prevent those that have not arisen from arising. That's the first 2. That's talking about our faults. And the second 2 are saying, looking at the qualities that we don't have or that we do have. What qualities do we have? What good qualities do we have? Well, there's some that we just don't have yet. We need to make efforts to develop those. That's producing virtuous dharmas that have not yet arisen. And then there's some that we have, but they're just not strong enough. So that's developing the virtuous dharmas that have arisen. So those are the 4 complete abandonments. That's the second of the sort of categories of the 37 factors of enlightenment. And the next one is the 4 feet of miracles. And if you look at this name, it's kind of a hard one. These are talking about, basically they're talking about miraculous powers. And we'll talk about miraculous powers later. They come up in the later chapters. So, but basically, they're talked about in the sutras. Sometimes I've translated them as the 4 feet of miracles. Ian Coughlin translates them as in the ornament of Abhidharma, the Chim Abhidharma, he translates them as the limbs of the supernatural. It's kind of a difficult one to translate because actually when we're talking about miraculous powers, what we're really talking about, and this comes up later in the text as well, what you're really talking about is what makes something miraculous is actually, the nature of something well enough that you can actually do something that other people can't think they can do. So there are many, when you read the sutras, there are many discussions of people who have realization and then fly up into the sky, the height of 7 palm trees. Or like the story I told yesterday about Kapilabhadra, who achieved miracles and then flew from the palace back to the nunnery. Things like that. There are lots of stories like this. There are even more stories about telepathy, people knowing others' minds and things like that. And of course, this is a hard part for us to understand. But here we're not talking about those actual powers. What we're talking about, what is the basis for developing those powers? The basis for developing those powers is developing samadhi. If you have the samadhi, then you are able to develop the powers. So when we're talking about the 4 feats of miracles, we're talking about some samadhi that are the causes of developing miraculous power. So this is the samadhi of wishing with efforts to abandon. So you're making some effort. You've got the wish. You want to do this. And then the samadhi of diligence with efforts to abandon. So the samadhi is one that abandons things, and you're being diligent about it. The samadhi of mind with efforts to abandon, and the samadhi of analysis with efforts to abandon. So you're working to abandon and to abandon the obscurations and develop these qualities. So from the ornament of Abhidharma, the supernatural limb of concentration of aspiration associated with the abandoning application. So he's translating samadhi as application here. Refers to abiding in isolation, abiding free from attachment, abiding in cessation, abandonment through thorough transformation, resolute in a specific state, and pervasive engagement. So in other words, and that applies to all four of these. So basically what it's saying is that you want to develop these qualities, not necessarily to show off by producing materials, by producing miracles. If you're going to do that, you'll end up like Devadatta, as I think I told the story last summer. And he got, his basic problem started when he, well, from the jealousy, but then he tried to develop the power of miracles in order to be able to impress people. So if you're doing it to do that, it's not going to end up well. But if you want to just develop strong meditation, well, what do you have to do? You need to stay in an isolation. Not because it's bad to be with people, but because if you're with people, it's hard to settle your mind and you can't develop that. Abiding free from attachment. This means not being attached to things. These are similar to what are talked about in the 8th chapter of The Way of the Bodhisattva, where it first talks about isolation of body, which is being in isolation in mind, an isolation of mind, which is being free of attachment, then abiding in cessation, abandonment, and thorough transformation, and so forth. They're basically saying, really taking yourself apart, developing your qualities of meditation. That's the 4 feet of miracles. And the feet means that it's the cause. It's the basis or the cause for developing miracles. Then there are the 5 faculties. The 5 faculties are faith, diligence, mindfulness, prajna, and samadhi. And these 5 are really, really important. And actually, Khenchen Trungpa Rinpoche often speaks about these 5. So the first of these is faith. Well, what is faith? Faith is actually like a clear or pure feeling of mind. It's like this sort of sincere quality that you have in your mind. If you think about it, when you have a feeling of faith and you think of the Buddha and you feel faith, or you think of, I don't know, whatever guru it is who makes you feel faith, then you have there's a sort of clarity there, purity to that. And that's what we mean by faith. And there's diligence, and there's mindfulness. Diligence is, wanting to actually putting the effort in, being diligent. We've got the continuous diligence of just keeping it going at a steady pace, the excited diligence of, being really working hard for a short period of time, but both are necessary. And mindfulness. Mindfulness is just kind of remembering what you're supposed to be doing, being mindful of what's happening in your mind, what's happening in your body, and remembering what you should do or shouldn't do. Then prajna is just clearly knowing what is dharma, what isn't dharma, what is right, what is not, what should you do, not what should you not do, in both contexts of your conduct, but also in terms of the context of your meditation, in particular in terms of recognizing what is the nature. And then samadhi is being able to rest. So these are the 5 faculties. And of them, faith, I think, is an important one that we have to speak about. Of course, it already came up in the 2nd chapter, but to remind everyone who heard it before, or to just sort of talk about it anew for everyone who hasn't, which is probably more of you, or at least not from me. When we're talking about faith, it's that quality of the clarity of mind. And so faith is not necessarily something that what do you say? When we think of faith, here's the point. Faith in English and the Shraddha or Depa in Sanskrit and Tibetan are a little bit different. Now, the closest word we have in English to what's meant there is faith. On a surface level, it's similar. But the important difference between the two is that when we think about faith in English, we primarily get our ideas in English of faith from Christianity. And in Christianity, when they talk about faith, there are just things that are articles of faith, they say. Or we say in English, it's just a natural English term. So when you have faith in something, the word faith in English means something that you cannot prove or really know, but you believe that there is a God. Christian theologians have argued for centuries, is there logical proof of there being a God? And they have not come up with any. And so they take it as an article of faith. So an article of faith would be that, Jesus is his son and so forth. So these are things that you can't They don't have an empirical basis. They don't have a logical basis, but you take them as truth. And so when we hear the word faith in English, we often think to ourselves that it's just not got a basis. You're believing something, and it's kind of like, so faith is verging on superstition. Now, I think there's a distinction between faith and superstition for most, but for some people, they don't see much of a difference between faith and superstition. You know, especially if you're going into the more militant atheist end of things. So, but faith in Buddhism is different. Because when we're talking about faith in Buddhism, what are we talking about? Well, there are three different types of faith. First of all, there's just sincere faith, which is that faith of that sort of pure feeling of mind. And of course, I think you can definitely talk about, like, the Christian sense of faith would be like that sort of sincere faith. Or could be that sort of sincere faith. That would be like that. Then there is the faith of longing. The faith of longing, the second type, is like really wanting. You hear about the Buddha, you think about the Buddha, and you want to be just like the Buddha. Or in the context of this, you hear about the arhats, you hear about nirvana, and you think, I really want to do that. I want to do that. And that faith of longing is incredibly important. We need to really want to achieve liberation from samsara. That's what's the faith of wanting. Wanting to be like the arhats. You know, you hear the story of Chotapantaka I spoke about yesterday. So we hear about him sweeping and becoming an arhat, and we think, oh, if only I could do that. Right? So wanting to be like that, that's the second one. And then the third type of faith is the faith of conviction. And this is a very important type of faith, because what it means is that you believe and are certain, not because someone told you, but you have faith because you know for yourself, either empirically or logically. You use your mind. There's the famous saying that, as like splitting, rubbing, and polishing gold, examine my words carefully, bhikshus, do not accept them out of faith. So you have to look at them, and you have to see, and you have to examine and analyze them for yourself to see, is this true or is it not? So that when you have the idea, I want to become a Buddha, I want to become an arhat, I want to be just like Chotapantaka, I want to be like Kapila Badri, or whichever of those great beings you want to be like, you have the certainty that you can do it. When you have that feeling of longing, you know you can do it. When you see the Buddha, you know that when you think about the Buddha, you see a statue and that makes you feel faith. Well, that makes you feel faith because you know. You are certain. It's not superstition. So it's important to recognize that the two things. First of all, that it's not superstition, that you have a basis and you understand. That's the faith of conviction. Sometimes we translate this as the faith of belief, but I had a conversation with another and I use that term myself. I sometimes forget because I got in the habit of saying it, and I forget. But conviction is actually a good one because it's like knowing. It's not belief. Sometimes in English makes us think that it's like believing in God without a basis, but conviction is knowing you have a reason. So that's the faith of conviction. The other important point about faith is that usually we think about faith as having like this really strong emotional content. Like faith, oh, I feel faith. And you think you're going to be crying, you've got this, right? You think that's what faith means. Well, not quite. Faith is, it's like, it doesn't have to be, it's the emotional content is not what's important. Now, when you have sincere faith, there's this, of course, there may well be there probably is a bit of an emotional feeling there. You're seeing the Buddha and you go, and you have that clear feeling. There's some emotional content there as well. If a longing faith, you may well have an emotional content, but the faith of conviction, not necessarily. So you can't necessarily say that faith is just saying, oh, holy, everything like that. That's not necessarily feeling faith. And it also, like another example, or what this often makes me think of is there is a translation of a commentary on the Ornament of Clear Realization, and in the introduction to it, the translator writes, the texts all say that the purpose of the ornament of clear realization is to develop faith, but it's just a list of terms and names, and it's hard to see how anyone could develop faith. And this is like a misunderstanding of what do we mean by faith. What do we mean by faith? Well, we mean that conviction, knowing that this is right and wanting to do it yourself. Having the clarity that comes with it. That may be emotional, you may be crying out of faith, or you might be just feeling, I got to do it. But that is faith. So that's the first of the five faculties. And then when you have faith, what does that do? Well, you want to achieve, you want to be like Kapila Bhadra, you want to be like Chotapandaka, you want to be like the Buddha. You want to be like them. So what does that make you do? It makes you actually be diligent about it. You get excited about it and you want to do it. So you're diligent about it, right? So the diligence comes out of the faith. And then that diligence then leads to mindfulness. So when we talk about mindfulness, well, what is mindfulness? I mean, these days in English, when we talk about mindfulness, it's kind of like a shorthand for a particular meditation technique, which is based upon the 4 foundations of mindfulness, but it's a little bit different. It's changed, but it's based on it. So we talk about mindfulness, and people think you're talking about a specific type of meditation that you can download an app and do. But mindfulness in the text, actually in the word, means the Sanskrit word is smriti or anusmriti, depending upon the context. And really the two are very similar in meaning, smriti or anusmriti, and they mean to remember. So what are we remembering? Well, you're remembering what you should do and what you shouldn't do. So the mindfulness in terms of our conduct on a daily level is remembering, I should not kill. I should not steal. I should not commit sexual misconduct. I should not lie. I should avoid intoxicants or whatever. Remembering what you should avoid and not do. And then remembering what you should do. I should be jealous. I should be generous. I misspoke there. A bad misspeak. I sometimes mean one word and another word comes out of my mouth. I should be generous. I should practice discipline. I should do those. So that's remembering that. In the context of meditation, it's remembering the specific technique that you're doing. If you are meditating on counting the breath, it's remembering, I should be counting my breath. I shouldn't be following my thoughts. So remembering that. So that's mindfulness. Then as you have mindfulness, I think in my slide I had the order backwards. Actually, the next one that comes is samadhi. That helps you develop samadhi, because as you develop mindfulness, then your mind becomes more stable. And that stability of mind, the ability to rest with one-pointed concentration on an object, is samadhi. So your mind just stays. And concentration is maybe applying a little bit too much work. It's the ability for your mind to rest one-pointedly on an object. That is samadhi, just resting, without going back and forth, without needing much tending hither or thither. That's kind of the way, just samadhi is like that. And then out of that comes prajna. And so what is prajna? Prajna, it's often translated as wisdom, but what we mean in specific is the ability to distinguish dharma from non-dharma. What is dharma? What should I do? What is not dharma? What should I not do? So we'd say, okay, like smoking cigarettes. What is that? That is non-dharma. Actually, smoking cigarettes is neutral ethically. Well, maybe not, because it's actually motivated by greed. So I don't think that it's actually neutral. It's slightly negative. So you've got, but it's not going to make a huge difference except to your health. But it's non-dharma, so don't do it. What is dharma? You're just taking a look at a situation and knowing what is dharma, what is not dharma. What should I do? What should I not do? And so that is prajna. So those are the 5 faculties. So they're really important for us, and they're qualities that we need to develop as ordinary individuals. When we get to the stage of the path of joining, then they become, they're mental factors mostly. And when you get to the state of, the path of joining, then they become strong. You've been gathering merit, and then they become stronger, and you kind of have like control, or they give you control. And at that point, we call them faculties, because the faculties are things that give you control. Like the eye gives you control over seeing. In the same way, the faculties give you control over developing the undefiled qualities. So that's why they're called faculties. It's the 5 faculties. Then the 5 faculties become the 5 powers. 5 powers are actually, they're exactly the same thing as the 5 faculties. Faith, diligence, mindfulness, and prajna. This is the easiest slide to make because all I had to change was one word. So the 5 faculties, but the difference is that not only do you have control, but then as they get stronger, then they give you power. So they're called the 5 powers. And then we have the 7 branches of enlightenment. So this is the next set of the 37 factors. This is mindfulness, which we've already discussed. The second one is full discernment of dharmas. This is clearly seeing things well. This is right view, knowing things as they are and having the right understanding of them. It is also prajna. View and prajna are the same. The next one is diligence. And then there's joy. Like joy, there's kind of a joy to doing it. Because like when you're on the path of seeing, there's like a joy you're going through. I'm seeing the 4 noble truths. There's a joy that arises, so that's the joy. The next one, pliancy, also called workability, sometimes we translate it as, means like your mind is workable. Your mind and body are workable. You can do things. You can mold them and make them be how you like. That's pliancy or workability of body and mind. And samadhi, we have already discussed, being able to rest one pointedly on a focus. And equanimity there are different meanings, but here it's mean like not having biases, not expecting anything, just kind of being, okay, everything's fine. Those are the 7 branches of enlightenment. And then the last group of the 37 factors of enlightenment is the Noble Eightfold Path. So this has the Eightfold Path of right view, right thought, right speech, right action, right livelihood, right effort, right mindfulness, and right samadhi. So these are all different aspects that you practice primarily on the path of meditation. That's where there are different presentations, and some people say this is on the path of seeing, some people say it's on the path of meditation. We'll say it's on the path of meditation for today's sake, but this is what it is. So basically making sure that you have the right path and right view and right thought. Right speech means that you're thinking and that you're speaking well. Right actions that you're doing well, right livelihood. In other words, you're not going to act out of craving or so forth in order to procure a livelihood. Right effort is not trying too hard, not trying too little. Right mindfulness and the right samadhi. So those are the 37 factors of enlightenment. And so they're important qualities. They're really important in the sutra tradition especially. And they're talked about quite a bit in the sutra tradition. They're also very important in the tantra tradition as well. They're often mentioned in the tantra tradition, and often they're symbolized in the tantra tradition. So you shouldn't think to yourself, oh, that Abhidharma, it's all these things, 37 factors of this of that, and all that, and it's just like, oh, not so, what do we say? It's just not so important for me, it's not that big a deal. So I don't need to worry about them because I'm a Vajrayana practitioner or something like that. That's not how you should think about it, actually. They're really important qualities that we have to develop and we have to understand. Because if you want to talk about understanding what you're doing in Tantra practices, and they say, oh, this symbolizes the 37 factors of enlightenment, and you don't know what the 37 factors of enlightenment are, how can you know what we're actually talking about? They're important qualities. And furthermore, we have to develop these in ourselves, no matter where we are, like these four complete abandonments. Recognizing the negative qualities you have and trying to eliminate them, trying to prevent new ones from happening. and then you also have recognizing what positive qualities you lack and you need to develop, and doing what you can to try to develop them. And then trying to increase the positive qualities you have. You might feel like, well, I've got a little bit of faith, but it's not that strong. So you need to increase it. So you do what you can to increase it. So these 37 factors of enlightenment are really very important. So that is the important point of this. And again, the qualities, and then the five faculties are also very important: the faith, diligence, mindfulness, samadhi, and prajna. As one of the participants in Zoom has sent a message, all the formal teachings and practice are there for one thing alone, to give us faith, according to Trungpa Rinpoche. Or another way to put it is that the faith is the basis for all virtuous qualities. It's like the ground out of which all virtue. It's like just as the ground allows plants to grow, the faith is the basis out of which all the virtuous qualities grow. So now there was a question that came in last night, and or this morning. So I've already dealt with part of it, and this is actually a very interesting question. So the question is about the meditation discards, because we have the meditation discards of desire, anger, pride, and delusion. But earlier on in the text, it says in verse 32 and 33, it reads, out of delusion, doubt, from that wrong view, then personality, from that overesteeming discipline, overesteeming view for one's own view, there's pride, attachment, and hate for others in this order. So basically it's saying that when you have the 10 kernels developing in the 5th chapter, first you have delusion, delusion leads to doubt, doubt creates wrong view, and then personality view, and then the other views. And then when you have views, you have pride and attachment and hate in that order. So it kind of makes it sound like if you are missing anything in the middle, then how are you going to get the later ones? But pride and attachment and hate are all discards of meditation, and all those middle ones are missing. So how can they happen if all the middle ones in that verse are not there? So I think that verse is actually talking about the development of the kernels. Particularly, it's talking about the discards of seeing, which are based primarily on delusions and doubt. So I think it's primarily talking about those. But the other factor is it's talking about how they're arising, how they occur, and then how they develop, and how they arise and develop. But when you're on the path of meditation, the kernels, because you're already a noble being, the kernels, the afflictions can arise to a certain extent, but not very strong, and never strong enough to actually make you go into, motivate you to actually perform a negative action. The views at that point have already been discarded, and so forth. But the kernels are still present in your being. So you have to eliminate the kernels on the path of meditation. So the difference between the discards of seeing, what you can discard by merely seeing the truths, and the discards of meditation, which are more deeply ingrained, is that the discards of seeing are based on the imaginary idea of a self. So how can it have been discarded when there are still, so if you wonder how can it be discarded when they're still desiring and so forth, well, what desire, anger, and delusion? Well, it's because the desire and anger, delusion are actually the more deep-seated variety that's not based on that view of the self. Now, the questioner also says, often in the Mahayana is taught that once the ego clinging has been uprooted, everything else connected to it will also collapse. Or do I misunderstood what is meant by personality view? Perhaps as a kernel, it is not the same as belief in it. Okay, so in the Mahayana, the presentation is a little bit different. In the Mahayana, we talk about two different types of personality view. We talk about instinctive and imaginary. So the imaginary is what you learn from other people. This is what's based on the imaginary idea of a soul or self, and that's what's discarded on the path of seeing. The instinctive personality view in the Mahayana is that subtle clinging to a self that all sentient beings have, even ants, even grubs, They all want to preserve themselves. So they all have this subtle grasping at a self. So that's a slightly different level. Different level of it. And on the in the Mahayana, the sequence given in the ornament of clear realization is a little bit different. You eliminate the you eliminate the imaginary ones in the path of seeing. Those are all gone. But the instinctive personality view takes a long time to uproot over the path of meditation. So they're a little bit. There's a little bit of a difference there in the order that or the way in which the discards are discarded, and the order in which they're discarded, the methods of discarding them. So it's a different presentation. But in any ways, what we're saying is that basically on the path of meditation, you still have subtle levels of these afflictions that are there. They're not strong enough to motivate you into action. And in particular, you already have seen the truth, so you know exactly what's going to happen to you if you act upon them. So because you know that, you're not going to feel like you can get away with it. Often the biggest problem when we have an affliction arise and we think to ourselves, I feel like doing something, you kind of know in the back of your mind, this isn't a good idea, but you can't stop yourself because you have this wrong view. So it's like, I think I can get away with it. I can get away with it. Yes, I can do this. Well, actually, you can't. When you're a noble being, you recognize that. So you're not going to actually act on the discards of meditation, even though you don't have it. Even though you don't have the personality view, they're still there, but you're not going to act on them because you don't have the wrong view. So that is that. Okay. So I think that is enough for this morning's class. And so we will do what? Let me get to the right spot in. Okay. We will now dedicate the merit. So please think to yourselves that we need to bring all of our mothers, all sentient beings, we need to bring all sentient beings to the state, we need to dedicate the merit of teaching and listening to the Dharma so that all sentient beings can be brought to the state of omniscience. So we may reach that state first and then benefit all sentient beings. So please dedicate this merit to great enlightenment and please recite these verses. Osanam de tam che se pani Tobnen ye peranam pamchete Kegana chiba long chubai Sipe tsole rogun yorosho. By this merit may we attain omniscience, defeat the enemy, wrongdoing and free. All beings swiftly from the ocean of existence, churned by great waves of birth, age, sickness, and death. Chanchup sencho rinpoche, make panam ke jurachi, kepa nyamba me pariang, gonne gondu pelwar sho. May bodhicitta, great and precious, arise in those who have not roused it, never weakening in those who have, may it grow ever stronger and stronger. Okay, so thank you very much.
Thank you so much.
Okay, bye-bye.